Hey you, welcome back to Secrets with Maeve, the space for the conversations we usually keep to ourselves. I'm Maeve. Today we're talking about something I know so many of us struggle with in silence. Stop chasing her. Try this and she'll be obsessed viral dating hack. Let's get into it. She didn't lose interest suddenly. You just didn't notice the moment she started feeling less. At first, everything felt natural, effortless, even. The conversations flowed. Her energy was warm, and there was a quiet sense that things were building towards something real. You didn't have to try too hard because her interest met you halfway. But then something shifted, not loudly, not dramatically, just subtly. Her replies became slightly shorter. The excitement in her voice softened. The way she used to lean into you emotionally started pulling back. And that's when you did what most men do. You leaned forward. You texted more. You tried harder. You gave more attention, more reassurance, more effort, thinking it would bring her back to how she used to be. But instead of fixing it, it made things worse. And now you're here confused. Because from your perspective, it doesn't make sense. You're doing more for her. You're showing more interest. You're being more available. So why does it feel like she's slipping further away? This is where most men misunderstand what's actually happening. You're focusing on what she's doing instead of why she's doing it. Because her behavior isn't random. It's a response, not just to what you say, but to what she feels when she's around you. And right now, something about that feeling has changed. What's actually happening beneath the surface is much quieter and much more psychological than you think. Attraction for a woman isn't built on effort alone. It's built on emotional experience. How she feels when she interacts with you, how she perceives your presence, how much space there is for curiosity, for tension, for uncertainty. And without realizing it, the moment you started chasing her, you removed all of that. You replaced mystery with predictability. You replaced emotional tension with constant availability. You replaced curiosity with certainty. And certainty, while it feels safe, doesn't always feel attractive. This doesn't mean she doesn't like you. It means the dynamic has shifted. Because when a woman senses that she no longer has to invest, that your attention is guaranteed, that you're more focused on keeping her than understanding her, something inside her starts to disengage. Not consciously, not intentionally, but emotionally. And the more you chase, the more you confirm that shift. Because now, instead of feeling drawn to you, she feels like you're trying to pull her back. And that creates pressure, not obvious pressure, but emotional pressure. The kind that makes her take a step back just to feel balance again. This is the part most men never see clearly. They think attraction is about doing more texts, more effort, more presence. But what if the very thing you're adding is the reason she's pulling away? What if chasing her is actually teaching her how to lose interest in you? Because the truth is, attraction doesn't grow when it's forced. It grows when it's allowed to breathe. And right now, there's no space left for that. You filled every gap, every silence, every pause, every moment where she could have wondered about you or felt your absence. And without those moments, there's nothing for her emotions to move toward, only something that's already there, constantly, predictably waiting. So instead of feeling drawn in, she slowly starts pulling away. Not because she wants to hurt you, but because something inside her is trying to restore a feeling that's been lost, a feeling you didn't even realize you took away. And until you understand that, you'll keep trying to fix this the wrong way. You'll keep chasing, hoping that more effort will bring her back without realizing it's the one thing pushing her further away. What's actually happening beneath the surface is not about her losing interest in you. It's about her losing the emotional experience she once had with you. And that distinction changes everything, because when a woman feels drawn to a man, it's rarely because of what he's doing on the surface. It's because of how his presence makes her feel internally. There's a certain tension, a subtle uncertainty, a quiet curiosity that keeps her emotionally engaged. In the beginning, you had that without trying. You weren't overthinking every message. You weren't monitoring her responses. You weren't trying to secure her attention. You were simply present and slightly unpredictable. And that unpredictability created space. Space for her to think about you. Space for her to wonder. Space for her emotions to move toward you instead of just reacting to you. But the moment you started chasing her, that space disappeared. This is where most men misunderstand the dynamic. They believe consistency means constant availability. They believe showing interest means increasing effort. They believe that if something feels like it's slipping, they need to hold on tighter. But what's actually happening is the opposite. When you become too available, you remove the emotional tension that attraction feeds on. Because tension doesn't come from distance alone. It comes from uncertainty, not insecurity, but a natural sense that she hasn't fully figured you out yet, that there's more to you than what's immediately visible, that she still has to invest emotionally to understand you. And when that investment disappears, so does her engagement. You're focusing on what she does instead of why she does it. Her shorter replies aren't just about being busy. Her slower responses aren't just about timing. Her emotional distance isn't random. It's her way of adjusting to a shift in how she feels. Because now, instead of experiencing you, she's receiving you constantly, predictably, without needing to reach for you. And when there's nothing left to reach for, her emotions start to settle, not deepen, settle. This is where attraction quietly fades without any clear reason. From your perspective, it feels confusing because you're doing more than before. You're being more attentive, more responsive, more present. But from her perspective, something feels different, less exciting, less engaging, less emotionally stimulating. The fun for look for she's a mega knot, and she can't always explain it. She just feels it. This is why chasing her doesn't bring her closer, because attraction isn't built on reassurance. It's built on emotional movement, the feeling that something is developing, unfolding, evolving. But when you're always there, always giving, always initiating, there's no movement left, only stability. And while stability is important later, in the early stages, it can feel like emotional flatness. What's actually happening beneath the surface is this. She's no longer trying to figure you out. She's already placed you in a category. The one who is available, the one who is predictable, the one who is more invested. And once that perception forms, her behavior follows it, not consciously, but naturally, because attraction is responsive. It responds to energy, to emotional presence, to the balance between interest and space. And right now, that balance is gone. You've given too much clarity too soon, and clarity, while it feels honest, removes the very thing that keeps her emotionally engaged. The unknown. This doesn't mean you need to become distant or cold. It means you need to understand the psychology behind what she's responding to, because she's not pulling away from you as a person. She's pulling away from the feeling that's no longer there, the feeling of curiosity, the feeling of emotional tension, the feeling that being with you is something she's still discovering, not something that's already fully available. And until that feeling returns, her distance will continue, no matter how much more you try, because more effort without understanding only deepens the imbalance. And the deeper that imbalance becomes, the harder it is for her emotions to reconnect the way they once did. If you look closely, her behavior has been telling you everything, not directly, not in words, but in patterns. Because when a woman's emotions begin to shift, she rarely announces it. She expresses it through small, consistent changes that most men overlook or misinterpret. This is where awareness becomes more important than reaction. You're focusing on isolated moments instead of seeing the pattern forming underneath. For example, she doesn't just reply late once, it becomes a rhythm. She doesn't just cancel plans randomly, she becomes less eager to make them. She doesn't suddenly become cold, she gradually becomes less emotionally available. And each of these shifts is subtle enough to be explained away. She's just busy. She's probably tired. Maybe I'm overthinking. But what's actually happening beneath the surface is much more consistent than it appears. Her emotional investment is decreasing, not all at once, but slowly. And the more it decreases, the more your behavior starts increasing to compensate. This is the hidden pattern most men fall into. She pulls back slightly. You lean in more. She becomes less responsive. You try harder to engage her. She invests less. You invest more to balance it out. But instead of restoring attraction, this creates a quiet imbalance. Because attraction doesn't grow through compensation, it grows through mutual investment. And right now, that mutuality is gone. She's no longer meeting you at the same emotional level, and instead of noticing that you're trying to fix it by filling the gap, but the gap is exactly what needed to exist. Because within that space, her emotions had room to move, to reach for you, to think about you, to feel your absence just enough to stay connected. Without that space, there's nothing for her to move toward, only something that's always there. This is why her behavior starts to feel inconsistent. Some days she seems engaged again. Other days she feels distant. It creates confusion. But the inconsistency isn't random. It reflects her internal state. Moments where she briefly reconnects with the feeling she once had, followed by moments where that feeling fades again. And every time you respond by increasing your effort, you interrupt that natural cycle. You don't give her the chance to lean back in because you're already there trying to pull her forward. This is where most men unintentionally push her further away, not by doing something wrong, but by doing too much of what feels right. You think consistency will reassure her. But what she actually responds to is emotional pacing, the natural back and forth of connection, the subtle rhythm where both people invest, pause, and re-engage. When that rhythm is broken, attraction loses its momentum. And right now, your actions are creating a one-sided rhythm. You initiate, you maintain, you sustain, while she slowly withdraws. Not because she's playing a game, but because her emotional system is trying to rebalance something that feels off. This is the part that's difficult to accept, because from your perspective, you're showing care, you're being attentive, you're being present, you're trying to build something real. But from her perspective, the dynamic feels uneven. And that unevenness creates a subtle pressure. The pressure to respond, the pressure to match your energy, the pressure to feel something she's no longer naturally feeling. And when emotions start feeling like pressure, the instinct is to create distance, not consciously, but instinctively. This is why she doesn't explain it clearly. She can't always articulate it. She just knows that something doesn't feel the same. And instead of moving closer, she steps back. What's important to understand is this. Her behavior isn't the problem. It's the result. A result of a dynamic that has slowly shifted out of balance. And until that balance is restored, her patterns won't change, no matter how much more attention you give. Because the solution isn't in doing more. It's in understanding the pattern and allowing something different to happen within it. Something that gives her a reason to lean back towards you again. This is where most men get it wrong. Not because they don't care, but because they misunderstand what actually creates attraction. They believe the solution is to prove more effort, more consistency, more reassurance. They think if they just show her clearly enough how much they value her, she'll come back. But what they don't realize is that attraction doesn't respond to proof. It responds to perception. And right now, her perception of you has changed. You're focusing on what you're giving instead of how she's experiencing it. Because from your side, it feels like care, but from her side, it can start to feel like predictability. And predictability, while comfortable, doesn't create emotional intensity. This is where the mindset needs to shift. You're trying to secure her when what actually drew her in was the feeling that she hadn't fully secured you yet. Not in a manipulative way, but in a natural, emotional sense. There was something about you she was still discovering, something she hadn't fully figured out, and that created curiosity. Curiosity led to engagement. Engagement led to attraction. But the moment you made everything clear, that curiosity faded because now there's nothing left to decode, nothing left to wonder about. And without that, her emotional involvement begins to flatten. This is where most men panic. They feel her pulling away and instinctively move closer, trying to close the distance, trying to restore the connection. But what's actually needed is the opposite. Not distance in a cold or distant way, but space, intentional space, the kind that allows her emotions to move again. Because right now, you're doing all the emotional work. You're initiating, you're maintaining, you're carrying the interaction forward. And without realizing it, you've removed her role in the dynamic. She no longer has to invest. She no longer has to wonder. She no longer has to reach for you. And when she stops reaching, she slowly stops feeling. This is the shift that changes everything. Instead of asking, how do I get her back? You need to ask what made her come toward me in the first place. It wasn't effort alone. It was the balance between presence and absence, the balance between clarity and mystery, the balance between giving and allowing her to give. Right now, that balance is gone. And the more you try to fix it with effort, the more you reinforce the imbalance, because effort without awareness becomes pressure. Even if your intentions are good, this is where emotional control becomes important. Not control over her, but control over your reactions. The ability to notice her pulling back without immediately chasing. The ability to sit in that space without trying to fill it. The ability to let the dynamic breathe even when it feels uncomfortable, because that discomfort is exactly what you've been avoiding. And in avoiding it, you've removed the very tension that creates attraction. This doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop overextending. It means you stop trying to manage her feelings and start allowing her to experience them naturally. Because the truth is, you cannot make her feel something. You can only create the conditions where those feelings can exist. And those conditions require space. Space for her to miss you, space for her to think about you, space for her to feel the absence of your constant attention. Without that, her emotions have nothing to respond to. Only something that's always there, and something that's always there rarely feels special over time. This is the mindset shift most men resist because it feels like doing less. It feels like stepping back. It feels like risking the connection. But in reality, it's the only way to restore it, because attraction isn't built through control. It's built through emotional movement. And right now, everything between you and her has become still, predictable, certain. And without realizing it, that certainty is what pushed her away in the first place. Until you understand that, you'll keep trying to fix this with the same approach and getting the same result. Distance. Attraction doesn't return because you chase it. It returns when you stop interfering with it. And this is the part that requires the most clarity, because by now you've probably realized something important. It was never about doing more. It was about understanding what your actions were creating. Every message, every moment of attention, every attempt to pull her closer was slowly removing the space her emotions needed to exist. Not intentionally, but consistently. And once you see that, everything starts to shift, because now the goal is no longer to get her back. The goal is to restore the kind of dynamic where attraction can grow again naturally, without force, without pressure, without you trying to manage every outcome. This is where control becomes quiet, not controlling her, but controlling your need to react. You begin to notice her distance without chasing it. You begin to feel the silence without rushing to fill it. You begin to step back, not out of fear, but out of understanding. And something subtle starts to change. Not immediately, not dramatically, but gradually, because when you stop overextending, you reintroduce something that's been missing, your absence, not complete disappearance, but the absence of constant availability, the absence of predictable attention, the absence of you always being the one to reach first. And in that space, her emotions finally have room to move again. This is where curiosity begins to return. Quietly, she starts to notice the difference. The shift in your energy, the way you're no longer trying to pull her in. And instead of feeling pressure, she feels something else. Space. And within that space, her mind starts to wander back towards you. Not because you forced it, but because there's finally something to move toward again. This is the moment most men misunderstand. They think this is where they should re-engage harder, where they should take advantage of the shift, but that would only restart the same cycle because attraction isn't about capturing the moment. It's about maintaining the balance that created it. So instead of rushing back in, you stay grounded. You respond, but you don't overextend. You engage, but you don't chase. You show interest, but you don't give everything away at once. And slowly, the dynamic begins to rebalance. She invests a little more. You allow it. She reaches out. You receive it without trying to control where it goes. And for the first time in a while, the connection starts to feel mutual again. This is what you were trying to create all along. Not attention, not validation, but a shared emotional experience where both of you are moving toward each other instead of one chasing while the other withdraws. And this is the deeper realization. You don't attract her by holding on tighter. You attract her by creating a space where she chooses to come closer freely, naturally, without pressure. Because when a woman feels like her emotions are her own, she trusts them more. And when she trusts what she feels, she follows it. That's when attraction becomes real again. Not forced, not fragile, but steady and self-sustaining. So if things have felt off, if she's pulled away and you didn't understand why, now you see it differently. It wasn't random, it wasn't sudden, and it wasn't something you could fix by chasing harder. It was something you needed to understand so you could finally do less of what was pushing her away and more of what allows her to come back on her own. If this made you see things differently, subscribe because understanding her mind changes.